Hello and welcome to the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Eric Schlossberg. Eric, it's an absolute pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Good, good. I'm excited to get into some of the topics that we're going to discuss today. But first, as always, Eric, in your own words, what makes you a man?
Yeah, happy to jump right in. I think it's a it's a pretty intense question, especially to ask a gay man who grew up in the 90s, that kind of question, because it really comes down to, as a gay man growing up in the 90s, we just don't fit society's standards of what it means to be a good man, a great man. And so it's again, a challenging question for me. And I think, every gay man grapples with this question at a pretty young age when they realize that who they are isn't, accepted as a good part of being a man. And you either rebel and decide that everything that society tells you is wrong and we need to redefine everything from scratch. And some people do that. I think most people do is they decide that that part of themselves is not a good part of being a man, and they hide it many, many years until they hit a point where they can't hide it anymore. And it's at that moment that I think of myself as becoming a man, where I've had to really question which aspects of being a man that society is throwing at me are aspects that align with core values of mine, and which ones don't. And so what makes me a man is having to deal with that point of inflection and having to decide which of these aspects I want to keep and which do I just throw away. And it's different for everyone, but and I think it's the type of thing that most men deal with at some point in their lives. Gay men in particular, we have to deal with it at a younger age, because we, at least back in the day, we really didn't fit what was considered acceptable by society. But most people, most men, at some point in their lives, they're going to realize some aspect of them does not match this this tale that society spins about what the ideal man is. And in that moment, you have to make a decision. Do you just hide every part of yourself and like smother and make it disappear, the parts that don't align, or do you choose to reject parts of the tale that society is telling you and make that choice, right? And for me, a lot of that, of course, as a gay man, a lot of that had to do with like, who do I love, right? Um, being attracted to men, I had to just reject that society was saying that that wasn't good, and completely get rid of that. And then there are other parts of being a man that society tells us that I do think are match my core values, like resilience and grit, all these sorts of things, that and hard work, and choosing to keep those and build those aspects of myself, and then reject aspects of dominance, aggression, other, being a lone wolf, all these other things that society says is what a great man is.
Do you think that question is easier for gay men now, or do you think it's harder now that things have changed even more when it means what is a man?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it also is contextual to like the place you're living in. I think, in the 90s in the US, where I'm from, things weren't great. Things were better than they were before that. And gay rights have improved faster in the UK. Maybe not trans rights, but certain areas are ahead, certain areas are behind. I think things are definitely a bit easier for younger men these days. I would guess, right? I'm not in their shoes, but we're more accepted in society,
Yeah.
right? And there's the internet, and the internet causes all sorts of bad and good things, but having access to loads of people online who are supporting your identity makes it easier, for sure. Because when I was growing up, there wasn't, yeah, we had the internet, I'm not that old, but we didn't really have role models in the media. There weren't influencers. Now there are tons of influencers, and you can find people who match who you are, or who you want to be. But back in the day, we just had gay comedic relief. Essentially, you'd see a gay person on TV, and they'd always be the same characterization. It's just ridiculous. It would always be like the super flamboyant guy, and they were the butt of the joke, or they're just super sassy, and that's it. That was our only representation. And what that did to me, and probably to a lot of people at the time, is I had this weird disassociation between being attracted to men and being gay. Like, yeah, I didn't realize this at the time, but I knew I was attracted to men. I wasn't okay with it, but it was just a reality. But I saw being gay as something else. I saw being gay as like this bad thing that wasn't like this just super flamboyant in a way that society mocks identity, which just led me to think, okay, I'm not gay, but I'm attracted to men, which is ridiculous, in hindsight, like that is what being gay is.
One of the things I'd really want to touch on, because I think it'd be really useful for listeners who may be struggling with this, is sort of the coming out story, right? That sort of acceptance, I guess. You're sort of talking about the first stage where it's almost denial, where it's like, I find men attractive, but I'm not gay. Can you sort of talk through your coming out?
Yeah, well, so I just hit a point in college. So nowadays, I think people are coming out quite early, but way back when, yeah, I feel like most of the people I know that are gay now didn't come out until their early 20s or late teens. I just hit a point where I had met a bunch of gay people. Actually, that was the big thing, right? Essentially community. I'd met a bunch of gay people who didn't fit. They weren't funny. They didn't fit the comedic relief character on TV. And I suddenly was like, wait, I identify with them. Like they're good friends of mine. Maybe I am. Maybe it's okay to be gay. Maybe I am gay. And then, for me, it took me a while between realizing that I'm going to come out before I actually decided to come out to anyone. Right. It's just my personality. I'm not the loudest, most like I like when things are calm and easygoing. And the whole idea of coming out is a confrontation, even if it's a positive confrontation. So I decided to come out when I was in my second year of college. And I didn't come out until the very end of my senior year. I just didn't find the right moment. I thought I was ready. And then my life did get a lot easier, so much better. I didn't come out to my parents for a few more years, but I just felt like all of the like layers of lies that had built up around myself, that was kind of my way of protecting myself. I was slowly getting rid of them, slowly able to live in a way where I didn't need to think think twice before saying anything that revealed the truth. I could just be honest for once in my life about anything. Um, So honestly, life has gotten just a lot better since then. It's been a long time since then, but I do remember that first year after coming out, it felt like the world was a different place. But I also wasn't living with my family at the time, and I can imagine like coming out while you still have you know potentially judgmental parents that are around you all the time wouldn't be such a great experience. Not that my parents were particularly bad when I did come out to them, but I was off on my own. So it allowed me to kind of create my own life.
Yeah, you sort of hear similar stories. I've a friend that I went to school with, came out as soon as he went to university. Obviously, knew he was gay at school, but waited until he'd got there and completely changed, and it was great for him. You can see almost a relief. You can almost see it in photos, I guess, of like what he used to look like and what he looks like now, and it's that almost like a lightness, sort of has was around him, which was great to see. And I think one of the things that's really interesting, and there's a little bit of a parallel here to sort of that first question that I ask, which is that self-defined, right? You were sort of saying these are the characters that are portrayed as gay men on the media, and men as a whole sort of also have that, in a sense, where it's like, this is what a man should be, this is what a man is doing. And as we've sort of gone through the past, well, like you say, 90s, 2000s, and to where we are now, being self-defined is actually more masculine than it's ever been. It's that ability to say, this is what I do, this is what I am, and that is now masculine because I am a man, essentially. Do you see that in the gay community as well?
The gay community is weird because suddenly we're being, well, for the past 10 years, suddenly we're accepted into mainstream society, where I would say the people who have the easiest time with self-defining their masculinity are the ones that had harder youths. When, if we had a rougher childhood and had to make that that point of self-defiance where we do self-define, I think have done a better job of that nowadays than like when I do meet some younger people where they didn't really have to go through that as much. So they also haven't really spent too much time figuring out who they want to be. Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of a switch from the straight society and what I've seen in the gay world.
One thing that I sort of want to touch on is sort of cis men within the sort of gay community and the LGBTQ plus space. They've were sort of the first frontier of sort of gay rights and activists, shall we say. And some may say you're okay now, but I feel like you're still maybe not fully accepted by some men, but there almost seems to be a top trumps going on within the LGBTQ plus, sort of like I've got the worst issue. Do you feel things like that? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, no one will say that out loud, like no one will admit to it, but yeah, it's a funny question to ask, right? Because there, and it's not just in the LGBTQ plus world. It's all across like liberal society. You know, the more oppression you've had, that it kind of gives you some social capital. So
Yeah.
for sure, it's not a bad thing. Things aren't quite as good in. So I've lived in London for a number of years, and I'm from the US, and I'm back in the US right now. Things are better for gay men in the UK than in the US. So I think there's a little bit less of that oppression Olympics in the US because we're still not fully accepted outside of the major cities. And there's still, there's a lot of religion in the US, and religion tends to lead to like lack of acceptance. But for sure, that's always going to exist, I think. And it doesn't bother me. It just means, as a white, gay, cis man, I do have more privilege in society, but it also doesn't remove the fact that I grew up in the 90s where where I had to hide who I was. It doesn't change my history and the challenges I had to overcome.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. I'm obviously on the peripheral. It's nothing that I can see. I just had a few conversations with some gay men, and they've said that they feel some of the stuff that may be happening now is undoing a little bit of the work that was done X amount of years ago, and is like starting to bring hatred sort of back towards them. And yeah, just wanted to get your sort of
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, when if you're, this is a bit like theoretical, I guess, but I think the people who can do the most damage to other people are the ones who feel the most victimhood, usually for good reason. But, if you're a victim, it makes it really easy for you to victimize someone else, either someone who's doing better than you in society, but also people who are doing worse because, again, you're a victim of something else. So I think a little bit comes down to that. If you're at the bottom of society and not doing well, not accepted, um, maybe it makes you feel a little bit better to punch up. I don't know. I don't have again, that's just my take on it.
yeah, for sure. It's not there's no right answer with these, is there? Right? It's just let's see where we can sort of pick some threads and see what people are thinking. It's an interesting space for sure. I guess one of the sort of questions, I guess maybe some listeners may have and may want to sort of get an understanding of is sort of right now there's a huge conversation around sort of male loneliness, right? And the idea that men have very few male friends. How do you go about sort of the difference between a sexual relationship or a relationship that has an intimate potential and sort of creating a friendship in this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So yeah, so in the gay world, we have this term historically called chosen friendships, and we again historically we've been if you're not accepted by your parents, you end up finding friends who support you, and they become your family.
Yeah.
So we do have a history of building out friendships very quickly, but there is always this potentially blurred line between is someone a friend or is there romantic potential there. And it's actually, I think it's a major problem in the gay world because a lot of people will become friends with you thinking that there might be potential to turn into something else. And, the negative of that is So the positive of that is if your people find you attractive, you have an easier time making new friends because the people who don't turn into romantic relation, well, serendipity, if you spend a lot of time with them, they might end up becoming good friends of yours. But the people who don't do as well in the dating world often have fewer people reaching out to them to potentially become friends with them. So it creates this sort of isolating spiral effect where, the people who don't do well in dating also don't do well making new friends because they have fewer opportunities to make new friends because of that blurred line where there's always potential.
Yeah, because there's obviously sort of like a manosphere sort of angle on this. Is like men and women can't be friends. Like that's sort of like an ideology. If you're a friend with a woman, that means that you're a bit of a simp or something like that, and that deep down you want to sleep with them and want to have a relationship and are just waiting for the right moment, kind of thing. And yeah, there's that sort of balance between like, does he
Yeah.
want or like, does he want to have sex with me? I'm not too sure. Which obviously not everyone wants to have sex with everyone. Like that's not the gay world, right? But there's got to be that sort of thought
Yeah.
process going through.
I think, when we think of this idea of a simp in the straight world, like it's just a very reductionist like view of things, right? Just because you met a woman you're that you potentially want to be friends with. I don't know. There's blurred lines in the straight world as well. Like
Yeah,
it's not like everyone's in a bucket. You either want to sleep with them or you want to be friends with them, and there's nothing in between. Or I mean, I guess they're saying you don't want to be friends with them. There's a full spectrum, you know, and it's the same thing in the gay world too. Like you might just want to be friends with someone, you might be attracted to them, maybe friends with benefits is an option. I don't know. The world is way more complicated, I think, and relationships in particular, in order to put them into these extreme buckets. It's easy for rhetoric, though. This guy's a simp because he's just friends with this girl. He just wants to sleep with her. Maybe he can't stand her, like on a, in a romantic way, or he's not even attracted to her, but he has a good time spending time with her. It's that's a
yeah.
possibility too.
Well, it's interesting you say like putting in like everything seems to have a label, yet when you sort of just peel back one layer, it becomes far more nuanced than anything. It becomes far too complicated. We're always looking for boxes and things to put things into, and yeah, it's again also all the way going back to the beginning is like how do we become self-defined? How do we allow ourselves to be who we want to be? Right? It's not a case of I'm in this box, so that's me. It's picking and choosing what works for you, right? It's a complex world for sure.
Yeah, I think that putting everything into boxes is damaging. It's easier to process the world. I don't know. I think it's quite damaging in a one, allowing yourself to accept yourself, like the stuff we were talking about at the beginning, but in understanding dynamics between people. Um, put someone into the box of this person only wants to sleep with me and that there's no potential for friendship, that's the only reason they're interacting with me, then you're obviously going to treat them poorly, unless you want to sleep with them, right? But if you don't want to sleep with them, you're going to treat them poorly because you've decided that that's how they see you and that's their only interest in you, when they might be interested in your brain or your personality, or I mean, just spending time with you for a variety of reasons. Mentorship, like there's all sorts of reasons that a person might enjoy spending time with you that doesn't have to relate to having sex with them.
100%. I mean, we are animals, right? I think that's probably where it all sort of stems from is this sort of biology of we are trying to sleep with someone. It might not be that person, but we have sort of grown out it a little bit. I do want to sort of touch a little bit more on that sort of loneliness side of things and really start to get into it from a gay point of view because there's sort of different stages, right? So we've talked about the coming out. So there's probably an element of loneliness right there where you're just I'm myself. No one knows I'm gay. This is quite lonely. I don't have anyone to talk to. But then there's this sort of next stage where you're exploring your sexuality, but you're also still trying to keep friends, make friends that you've had before you were gay, essentially, to the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's the coming out, right? You decide to come out to the first person, and then we say like there's one moment of coming out, but in the gay world, it's you're just constantly coming out to people. But like the hardest part is coming out to all of your friends and your family, like one by one. It's a little annoying for someone like me who I'm a little conflict averse. Like I don't enjoy those moments. It was exhausting, right? I had to have a one-on-one essentially with each of my friends, like, hey, just so you know, I'm gay. How do you feel about that? Right? You don't say how do you feel about it, but you're sitting there, you're like, I'm gay, and then you lean in, like waiting to hear how they respond. It's a bit ridiculous, but I was very fortunate. All of my friends, when I came out to them, were super supportive. You know, they had met other gay people in college. None of them had never met a gay man before, and so some of them had a bunch of gay friends. I don't know. It was, uh, but then I do remember thinking in my head, are they going to think of me differently? And I think there's, a yes and no. In the moment, they don't really think of you that differently, but then there's this whole new area of my life that I'm exploring, and I'm sharing details with them. And yeah, they probably do think of me slightly differently than they did in college, but that's just because I've changed and I've expanded beyond who I was at the time. And that whole new side of me is a part of me that all of my straight guy friends in college, for example, now see as a part of me.
Yeah, you outgrow friends anyway, right? It doesn't matter whether you sort of come out or not. You're gonna change as a person as you grow and do different things. And as you mentioned, you've lived in different parts of the world. That's in itself is too much for some people. They can't even cope with.
Yeah, I think that's definitely some aspect of my personality that annoys my friends because I'm always bringing up comparisons. It's really hard not to do when you've lived in, I've moved around. I think I lived in around 10 cities in 10 years in 5 or 4 countries. But yeah, I think one thing that I would say that has been interesting from my perspective is the progression of my life, my social life after college, and then watching all of my friends, both the women and the men, and seeing their social lives progress over time after college. I think big, there definitely was a big difference between my social life after coming out of the closet, and a lot of my straight male friends' social lives after coming out of the closet. And just in terms of the number of friends I've made, a lot of my friends in college, they don't really have too many new friends since college. And some of them are okay with that, and some of them aren't too happy with it, but they also haven't really put in the effort to make new friends. Whereas, I have. I don't know if it's the gay thing or if it's just me, but I've spent a lot of time building out new friends in every city I've moved to. And many of them have the same like core group of friends from college, but none of them live in the city that they live in. So I don't know who they spend time with.
Yeah, well, we've spoken about this before, right? Where it's like I've also traveled and I've tried to immerse myself and make friends, and even that I've found like quite difficult. I've probably got 3 or 4, maybe 5 people that I would class as sort of friends from all the ventures that I've done outside of university. So like post sort of college to the American listeners. And I find it tough. And we like a lot of men don't really know how to make friends once they've
Yeah.
reached certain, like most of our friends are the guys we sat next to when we were 4. Like it's as simple as that, right? So what's the difference there between straight and gay men?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a few different things. I think a lot of it comes down to being told not to value it at a younger age, building out new friends, and the ease of building out new friends when you're a child. Just you don't develop the skill set necessary. Maybe that's part of it. And as a gay man, we kind of embrace uh, aspects of that are considered feminine, like hyper valuing friends, putting tons of effort into building new friends, not being a lone wolf is considered a good thing in the gay culture, right? So maybe that's a part of it. I think what I've noticed, a lot of the straight male friends that I have that haven't made a lot of new friends over the years, I think maybe it comes down to ego a little bit. They don't really know how, and when they make an attempt and it's not reciprocated positively, immediately, they don't follow up. Like a lot of what I found in every new city, a lot of why I've had an easy time building out like large friend groups in each city, except the first one I moved to, which was, and that's another story. It took me a long time to like figure out how to make my first friend there. A lot of it, I think, comes down to follow through. And, you know, if you meet someone new in anywhere, at a supermarket, at a church, at a club, and you want to hang out with them again, well, first off, someone needs to reach out to the other. First, you have to get the other person's number. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe you haven't done that, right? Maybe you see them again, which, at the same event next week. You get their number this time. Okay, now someone has to actually reach out to the other and say, hey, you want to get a drink? You want to go to the pub, right? Okay, already like this is like a sales funnel. Like we've already lost half of the men. And then, okay, maybe some percentage of them do reach out to the other person. And they say, okay, hey, want to go to the pub? That person's like, I can't. Okay, the first person probably thinks maybe this person doesn't want to hang out, or maybe it's on them now to reach out to me. But that's also just not the reality of the world. Some people are planners, some people are followers more, So like that first person who made that attempt probably should make another attempt. So the sales funnel is getting smaller and smaller. Like, will this person make a second attempt? Will they make a third attempt? Because the reality of it is, if you really need to make new friends and you found someone that you get along with, the chance that they are as desperate as you in that moment is low. But they might be open to making new friends. That
Yeah.
means the responsibility is on you. If you really want to make that turn into a friendship and they are kind of satisfied in their life right now, but open to making new friends, you've got to message them over and over again and meet up in real life over and over again until like a switch flips in their head and they start thinking to reach out to you. But it's kind of on you. And it's kind of an ego thing, right? You need to kind of get over yourself or kind of be okay. And this is actually an interesting thing, right? I've thought about it, right? Where maybe it's feminine to value friendships, right? Whatever. Maybe society says that. But
Yeah.
if you get over that and you're like, okay, I want to build new friendships, then you can take some of what society says about being a man and try to apply that to making friendships, like resilience or grit, right? Okay, I've reached out to them once. I'm going to be a man and reach out to them again because I don't care, right? I'm going to reach out again and again, right? If you can kind of co opt some of these aspects and convince yourself to use it in the sake of building out like meaningful friendships, it's possible. Really, I think it comes down to people not being able to do the follow through um, of like continued reaching out and turning it into a meetup. It's not like anything significant has to happen when you meet up with someone, but you do have to meet in real life over and over again if you want a real friendship to form. And it doesn't
Oh,
have to be, it could be once a month, but yeah, it can't be just you meet once and you consider them a friend for life. No, they're an acquaintance. You hung
yeah.
out once, you got a coffee.
I've got a real good real life example of this. A friend of mine is back in the UK a few months. Went and played golf in the middle of the week. He was playing on his own. He arrived at the golf course. There was another guy there. He said, "Oh, we're both playing alone. Do you want to play with me?" He was like, "Yeah, sure." Played all 18 holes. Chatted to the guy the whole way round. Had a great conversation. He was on paternity leave. That's probably another argument against giving dads more paternity leave, but that's again another debate. But yeah, he all the way around, he was like, yeah, he was a really great guy. Yeah, and he was like, I'll never see him again. And then they just walked off at the end of the 18 holes. Like they conversed and enjoyed each other's company for 18 holes, which is like 3-4 hours and gone.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I mean, it's a beautiful story, but then the next time that they're feeling a bit lonely or want some company, who do you reach out to? There's a statistic here in the US that I think is frightening. 21 million Americans have no close friends.
That's
No
it.
close friends. They have friends, they have people they know, but um 21 million, it's kind of crazy. And we kind of think that's normal or okay. I don't know, but I think it's a problem. There's been a lot of research on this, right? There's a famous book called Bowling Alone. Have you heard of this?
I've not. No.
It's Robert Putnam, he's a sociologist at Harvard, a very famous, I think, economist or political. I'm not sure what he does. I'll be upfront, but I've read the book, and it's all about the decline of social capital in society, in American society, and a lot of that has to do with like the decline of community spaces. Right? It used to be we build our community at church. It's called bowling alone because it was referring to like bowling clubs as a place that we built community. We had kind of social scaffolding built into society that's kind of eroded over the past 30 years and disappeared, at least from US society. In the UK, I guess people still go to the pub, and that's maybe the place to find community. I'm not sure.
Yeah, declining as well, for sure. Social scaffolding, that's a great word.
Yeah.
Really quite interesting, for sure. It's weird, isn't it? We move online. In theory, I can have 1,000 Facebook friends. I make an effort to have less, but we're connected, but so loosely now. It seems that now that we have more connection, we have less quality connection. Is that sort of the idea as well? Sort of the quality over quantity?
Yeah. I mean, I think, have these broad terms like connection and what does that mean? I do think, I think technology has had a very negative effect on community, on social capital, right? Having your social support networks, because yeah, you have things like social networks where you think you're connected and you're staying up to date on what's happening in people's lives, but you're not really connected. Really, I think the worst part is we have so much access to things to do alone now that it just enables us to not leave the house, right? I can go home at the end of the day and watch TV or play video games or doom scroll on Instagram or TikTok. But before any of these things were available, okay, maybe I could read a book before all this. Fine, I could choose not to go out, but probably I'd get bored at some point and I'd go outside. And when you're out and about in the world, then a serendipity takes over. You bump into people, and especially if more people are out and about in the world, you bump into, it just compounds. And technology in and of itself has made it so easy to not leave the house. And yeah, it's kind of sad. It doesn't have to, right? Technology can bring you closer together. You have text messaging. You can stay in touch with your loved ones, which has pros and cons as well. The telephone, right? You could call people, but every single one of these, if you spend time texting or on the phone, you're not spending time with people in the real world in that moment. So there's a downside to each of them.
I think you touched on it, which was really interesting, that sort of loss of shared screen. So, like cinema or theatre or just the TV in the house, where it was like, we have 4 channels. So tonight we have to all sit and watch one channel because there is no other TV channel.
Yeah.
Whereas 6 or 7 people can go into different rooms and watch whatever they want and binge it, right? It used to be, we have to sit down at 9, we have to be there together to find out what's going to happen this week in this series. Otherwise, you won't see it and you'll be
You know,
behind.
it's so true. And I remember when I was growing up, like if your favorite show was on at a certain time each week, you'd have like viewing parties. And people still do them sometimes. It was on at that time, so you either watched it on Sunday night at 10 p.m. or you missed it. I had to watch a rerun. Yeah, I think also what you're saying about everyone going into a separate room watching different things has a negative effect. I took a course during COVID. I was bored on positive psychology offered online by, I think it was a Yale course. And I do remember one of the studies that the teacher talked about, the professor talked about, was like, we know that doing stuff with other people makes it a better experience. Everything from eating ice cream with another person makes the ice cream taste better, like according to modern psychology studies. I'd imagine it's the same thing with watching TV. If you watch the season finale of Game of Thrones with your buddies, it's going to be a much better episode, a much more memorable experience than if you sit there watching it alone.
Well, take America as the prime example of this. I couldn't think of anything worse than watching 4 hours of football. But the Super Bowl Sunday is obviously a big thing in the States, right? There's parties. It's a huge bringing together of people who don't even watch football will
Yeah.
come, right? So there's definite proof in the pudding for that as well. It's really interesting that like just eating ice cream together, it tastes better because I guess maybe it's just the conversation, right? Oh, that was nice. I like that bit. Like it's just another neuron firing, right? Which is interesting when you say it out loud. It's so obvious, but we sort of have almost lost it a little bit. I guess the big question is sort of how technology can help to fix this. Like, what's the way that we can sort of reconnect using technology because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm working on. I think we've talked about this before, right? I have a company that is fighting loneliness through generating friendships, through kind of manufacturing social intent, right? So we're trying to make it easier for groups of friends to connect in the real world and using technology to get you off of the phone. I think a big challenge with a lot of social networks is their revenue stream comes from you spending more and more time on the phone. So their business model aligns with getting you to doom scroll. So we're focused on having a business model that if we get people to meet up at this place as fast as possible, we make more money, right? Aligning like our business interests with the interests of people, right? So what we're doing right now is using AI to do all of the nudging, all the stuff I was talking about before, like nagging the person and then feeling embarrassed that they didn't respond. Well, like if you have an AI bot in a group that does that, well, that AI bot's not going to feel embarrassed. It asks you, "Are you free on Friday?" and you say no. Um, Instead of like not responding, it'll be like, "Okay, what about Saturday?" And there's no ego behind this sort of thing. So there are ways, and there are companies that are trying to figure this out, how to connect people better in the real world. It's not easy to do, and really, what makes it not easy is that it's very hard to come up with a business model that makes it effective to incentivize getting people off of the phone and into the real world. That's the challenge, right? If it were easy, right? If every single person you connected with on Facebook, every new connection caused you to have a real world conversation, and that real world conversation gave Facebook $1, then Facebook would do a better job of it, for example. But of course it doesn't.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I did a podcast years ago now with a guy, and we spoke about Hinge's tagline, which is the dating app made to be deleted, right? But it's a monthly subscription.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And what so I mean what we're doing is we're trying to find places that we can essentially push for like meeting spaces, right? If we can make some money off of bringing people together at an escape room, or if they're into escape rooms, or at a pub, if they're into a pub, and we make some money back from that, we take on essentially the advertising of this, the marketing budget of these spaces, then we can incentivize actually getting off the app. We make money if they do meet up in the real world. And so that means as we keep optimizing, we should get better and better at figuring out how to get them off the app, right? That's the goal. That's our goal, at least.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it a lot, this sort of downfall of the high street, the lack of things that are available. Everyone moans about it, right? They're like, oh, there's nothing to do here. And then they'll go back to the scrolling. So yeah, if you can find a way that allows people to scroll, connect, and go somewhere and actually have a good time in society rather than online, then yeah, it sounds like a sort of solid idea. But yeah, like you say, a very tricky one. These places may not have the biggest budgets, but will be definitely desperate for custom. So
Yeah, and the thing is with the dating apps and the other social connecting apps, they try to monetize off of finding you a new person, right? Their whole idea is the hard part of making a new friend or the hard part of dating is finding the right person. And
yeah,
maybe that's the case for dating, right? But I'm not sure. But for friendship, the challenge isn't meeting someone new. Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge. Where do you meet someone new for the first time? But the real challenge is actually turning that new connection into an actual friendship. It's just
yeah.
a different challenge than that they're targeting.
Sort of on that, and sort of the idea of finding sort of groups of people and things like that. What have you sort of come across any other spaces in and around the men's space, particularly? Obviously, with this being a men's podcast that you really like, and sort of what do you want to see sort of more in regards to connection and men essentially getting out there?
Yeah, I think what's most important to me, where what I'd like to see more of is these community spaces being built out. And I think in order to do that, we need to incentivize men to value community building. So, even if building friendship just feels too not masculine enough for you, the way to turn it around is okay, maybe, focusing on friendship isn't masculine, but being a leader in creating community, a place for other people to support each other, that could feel masculine. So I'd like to see more community spaces being built by members of society that want to be leaders, micro leaders. And it's really important, right? Without this kind of scaffolding, what we talked about, social scaffolding, people don't have a place that they can connect. And here in Portland, so I played around with that a bit. I started an LGBTQ gaming community. So I moved to Portland, Maine about a year ago. And within a month, I was like, there's no place for gay, like geeky people to meet up. So I just started an organization around it and just started having meetups once a week, once every other week. And it's kind of turned into a whole thing because now this niche area within the queer community has a place that they can meet new people at, a place that they can go and they're always going to be invited, as opposed to friend circles where you have to like posture in order to make sure you don't fall out of the friend circle. We need these spaces where anyone can go. So I'd like to see more of those built up.
I'm a huge fan of building it yourself. Great podcast guest, Dan Summers, always tells the story of the farmers in the northeast of England who go on walks with their ferrets. So you have to have a ferret and you have to be a farmer, but you can turn up. Those are the only rules, and then everything else is free game. It's niche and it works. So that's whatever works for you. Create it, and I'm sure there'll be someone just as interesting as you that's interested in the same thing, right? It's just
but you got to go, you got to do it, right? Like someone needs to make it. If there's not someone who's running it, then it just doesn't. But it doesn't take much to run that sort of organization. You just need to put it out there and start having meetups and just repeat them. As long as you keep repeating them, people will come.
Awesome. Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure. If people have liked what they've heard and they want to find out more, where is the best place to find you? And I will leave the final thoughts of the podcast with yourself.
Yeah, sure. You can connect with me on my company's website. If you go to pulsenow.app, so pulse like your heartbeat, now as in here, .app, and just go to the contact session or just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Really, anywhere. I have a bunch of emails and they're all over the place. If you reach out to any of them, I'll get back to you.